The boy grabbed him by the collar of his coat and shoved him hard into the check-in desk. Not pushed, shoved, the kind that made the woman behind the counter flinch and look away. "I don't care who you think you are," the boy said, loud enough that the whole lobby could hear. "This line is for Platinum members. You're in the wrong place, old man." The man he was talking to, a tall, broad-shouldered figure in a dark gray blazer, natural silver at his temples, reading glasses folded in his breast pocket, didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't even blink. He just looked at the boy the way a mountain looks at weather. His name was Dr. Raymond Okafor, but nobody in that lobby knew that yet. Let's back up 20 minutes. The Meridian Grand was the kind of hotel that didn't need to advertise. It was the kind of place where the marble floors were always cold, where the flower arrangements were replaced every 48 hours, where the staff smiled with their eyes and called you by name before you reached the desk. It was the kind of place where money spoke quietly because it didn't need to shout. Raymond Okafor had been coming to the Meridian Grand for 11 years. Same suite. Same check-in window on the last Tuesday of every month, when he flew in from Atlanta for the quarterly board meetings at Hargrove Medical Systems, where he served as chief medical officer. He kept a standing reservation. The staff knew his coffee order: black, no sugar, with a small glass of cold water on the side. They knew he tipped well and complained almost never, and that he always left a handwritten note for housekeeping. He was not the kind of man who announced himself. He carried himself the way people do when they no longer need anyone else to confirm who they are. That Tuesday was no different from any other, except for the boy. Raymond had come in through the main entrance, rolling a single carry-on bag, wearing the gray blazer he always wore for travel, comfortable, presentable, not flashy. He'd gotten in line at the Platinum check-in desk, third from the left, because it was the shortest. He'd checked his phone, seen 2 emails from the hospital board, and was composing a response in his head when the boy appeared. He was maybe 25, maybe younger, the kind of young that thinks it's older. He wore a slim-cut sport coat the color of expensive whiskey and shoes that cost more than some people's rent. He had the particular posture of someone who has never once had to wait for anything: chin slightly up, shoulders back, eyes moving across the room like he was assessing what belonged to him and what didn't. He looked at Raymond standing in line. Then he looked at the Platinum desk sign. Then he looked back at Raymond. "Excuse me." He didn't say it like a question. Raymond looked up from his phone. "This line is Platinum only." The boy gestured at the sign above the desk with 2 fingers like he was directing traffic. "You're going to need to go to the standard line. It's over there." He pointed toward the far end of the lobby, toward the line with 11 people in it, the one that hadn't moved in 6 minutes. Raymond looked at him. "I'm aware of what line this is." "Then you know you don't belong in it." There was a small silence. "The kind that presses on a room." The woman behind the counter, her name tag said Deanne, kept her eyes on her screen. She had the careful stillness of someone who has learned that sometimes staying very still is the safest thing you can do. "I have a reservation," Raymond said, simply, without heat. Everyone has a reservation. The boy smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "That doesn't mean you're Platinum." "I've been Platinum with this hotel for 9 years. "Right." The boy glanced around the lobby, as if checking whether anyone was watching him be reasonable. 2 businessmen at the bar had turned slightly in their chairs. A woman near the elevator was looking at her phone but not scrolling. "Look, I don't have time for this. My father owns property with the Meridian Group. I know how this works." "You're holding up the line." Raymond was the only person in the line. He didn't point that out. "I'd like to check in," Raymond said. "And I'd like you to move." The boy stepped forward. Not all the way, just enough. The kind of step that is a message. "I've asked you nicely. Don't make me get someone." Raymond looked at him for a long moment. Then he set his carry-on bag upright, folded his phone into his pocket, and waited. He had learned, over 61 years of living in this country, in this skin, that the moments where you most wanted to speak were sometimes the moments where silence was the more powerful language. He had learned it in medical school, where his first attending physician had called him articulate like it was a surprise. He had learned it in hospital boardrooms, where he was often the only black man at the table, and where the way he sat and breathed and chose his words was always being assessed by people who thought they were being subtle about it. He had learned it in airports and restaurants and parking garages and, once, at a pharmacy in Birmingham where a woman had followed him through 3 aisles before a pharmacist she recognized walked over and said, "Dr. Okafor, your prescription is ready." He had learned that dignity was not something you performed for other people's benefit. It was something you kept for yourself. So he waited. The boy stared at him. Then he turned to Diane. "Is there a manager available?" Diane's jaw was tight. "Of course," she said. "One moment." She picked up the desk phone. Her eyes flicked to Raymond just once, just briefly, and in that fraction of a second there was something in them that wasn't apology exactly but was adjacent to it. The look of someone who knows what's right and has calculated, in the way that people do, the cost of saying so out loud. The manager who appeared was a young man named Preston, with the practiced calm of someone who had been trained to de-escalate without taking sides. He arrived at the desk, looked at both of them, and deployed the universal hotel expression: pleasant, neutral, non-committal. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. How can I help?" "This man is in the platinum line, and he doesn't have platinum status," the boy said. "I've asked him to move, and he's refused." Preston looked at Raymond. "Sir, may I pull up your reservation?" "Raymond Okafor," Raymond said. "Okafor." Preston typed. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind it, a small, internal adjustment, like a ship correcting course by 2 degrees. "Mr. Okafor," Preston said. "Welcome back. I have your reservation here, Suite 1408, Platinum Tier. Everything is ready for you." The boy blinked. Preston turned to him. "Sir, was there something I could help you with?" The boy stopped, started again. "I was told my father has an arrangement with the regional director." "Of course," Preston said. "If you'd like to provide your name, I'm happy to look into that." "Sutton," the boy said. His voice had changed. Slightly. "Brandon Sutton." Preston typed again. Waited. His face revealed exactly nothing. "I do see a note here," Preston said. "Your father, Mr. Gary Sutton, has a corporate account. That account covers standard tier accommodations." He paused, not cruelly, but precisely. "The platinum wine is reserved for platinum members. I'd be happy to check you in at the standard desk. There's no wait at this time." Brandon Sutton's face cycled through several things quickly. Then he said, "Fine," and he walked away, and the lobby watched him do it. Raymond checked in. He took his keycards from Diane with a nod. She said, "Welcome back, Dr. Okafor," and this time the way she said it was different. Not louder, just more deliberate. He went up to his suite, hung his jacket, set his bag on the rack, and stood at the window for a while looking out at the city below. It was a good view. It had always been a good view. He washed his hands. He ordered his coffee. He sat down with the board reports and began to read. He had been through worse. Much worse. He did not carry this particular afternoon with any special weight because the truth was, it was not special. That was the thing nobody ever wanted to say out loud. It wasn't an aberration. It was Tuesday. He had stopped being surprised by Tuesdays a long time ago. What he had not stopped doing, what he refused to stop doing, was showing up. Platinum line or standard line or no line at all, he showed up and he did his work and he did it well, and he let that be the thing that spoke. He did not know, as he sat there reading the board reports, that downstairs Brandon Sutton was on the phone with his father. He did not know that Gary Sutton, who did in fact have a corporate arrangement with the Meridian Group's regional director, had made a call. He did not know that the call had gone to Preston's direct supervisor, who had called Preston, who had done what people in his position sometimes did when money applied pressure from above. Raymond did not know any of this until there was a knock at the door of Suite 1408. He opened the door. Preston was standing there with a different expression than the one from downstairs, tighter, rehearsed, apologetic in the way that means I've been told to be apologetic. Beside him was a man in his mid-50s, silver-haired, in a blazer with the Meridian Group logo on the pocket. Raymond would later learn his name was Keith Albright, Regional Director of Operations, Southeast. Dr. Okafor, Preston said, "I'm sorry to disturb you. This is Mr. Albright." "Good evening," Raymond said. Albright cleared his throat. "Dr. Okafor, I apologize for the inconvenience, but I'm afraid there's been a situation with our system that's affected some of our platinum reservations this evening." He said it smoothly, rehearsed, like it had been agreed upon in a 30-second phone call. "We're going to need to move you to a different floor. We have a room available on the 7th. Suite 1408 is my standing reservation," Raymond said. "Yes, and normally. I've had this reservation for 11 years. We understand and we deeply apologize. There's a system issue." "Mr. Albright," Raymond's voice was even, not warm, not cold, even. "Is there another platinum guest who requires this suite?" A pause. "It's a system. Is there a system issue or is there a Gary Sutton issue?" The silence that followed was the kind that tells you everything you need to know. Raymond looked at Albright, then at Preston. Preston had the look of a man who knows he is on the wrong side of something and has not yet figured out the price of saying so. "I'll be staying in Suite 1408, Raymond said. "If there's a genuine system issue, I'm happy to see the documentation. If there isn't, I'd like to get back to my work." He closed the door. He stood in the middle of the suite for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his assistant, a sharp woman named Carol, who had worked with him for 14 years and who had an uncanny ability to make things happen through channels that Raymond didn't need to know about. "I need you to pull the Meridian Group's corporate policy on platinum reservation disputes," he said, "and get me the name of their director of guest relations at the national level." "Already?" Carol said. "Already," Raymond said. "Give me 10 minutes. He didn't need 10 minutes, as it turned out. He was still on the phone with Carol when his other line rang, the work cell, the one only a specific category of people had access to. He checked the screen. Dr. Vivian Hargrove. He told Carol he'd call back and switch lines. Vivian Hargrove was 81 years old and the founder of Hargrove Medical Systems, and she was possibly the sharpest person Raymond had ever met. She had recruited him herself 17 years ago, and she called him directly when something mattered. "Raymond," she said, "I'm in the lobby." He paused. "You're in the lobby of the Meridian Grand." "I am. I came in for the board dinner tomorrow, which I know you knew about, and I ran into a remarkable little scene downstairs that I thought you should be aware of." Her voice was dry, precise. "I understand you had some trouble at check-in. Word travels fast. I was standing by the elevator when it happened. I saw the whole thing." A beat. "I also just got off the phone with the chairman of the Meridian Group's board of directors, who happens to be a personal friend of mine and who was very distressed to hear about it." Raymond sat down on the edge of the bed. "Come have dinner with me," Vivian said. "I made a reservation." He came down in a different jacket, charcoal, double-breasted, the one he wore to things that mattered. He wasn't dressing up for anyone. He dressed the way he always dressed when something required it. That was a habit he'd had since residency, since the nights he'd come out of 18-hour shifts and changed his clothes before rounds, because the patients deserved someone who looked like they still had something left. Vivian Hargrove was waiting at a table near the window, small and upright, with the particular posture of someone who has spent 80 years being underestimated and has decided to enjoy the irony of it. She stood when she saw him. She was the kind of person who stood, and she shook his hand with both of hers. "You look tired," she said. "It's been a Tuesday," he said. She smiled. "Sit down." They ordered. The wine came. They talked about the board agenda, about a new cardiology wing the hospital was funding, about a research partnership Vivian was considering with Johns Hopkins. The conversation was good, the way conversations between people who respect each other are good, efficient, honest, occasionally funny. At some point during the main course, Vivian set down her fork and said, I want to tell you what I said to Walter. Walter was Walter Crisp, chairman of the Meridian Group Board. You don't have to, Raymond started. I told him, Vivian said, that I have been a guest of this hotel for 30 years, that I have brought more corporate business through its doors than I care to calculate, and that if the regional director of his Southeast properties is comfortable displacing a man of Dr. Okafor's standing in order to accommodate a phone call from a man whose corporate account covers standard tier accommodations, she said the last part with a particular precision, then I would be very interested to hear how he plans to explain that to me. Raymond looked at her. Walter will handle it, she said. He's already called Albright. Albright has, I understand, offered a rather sincere apology and a rather generous upgrade to the penthouse level, which I told him you would decline because you don't need a penthouse, you need the room you've had for 11 years. Raymond was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know I didn't have to, Vivian said. That's rather the point. She picked up her fork again. The boy, Raymond said, Brandon Sutton. His father is Gary Sutton. Sutton Capital, real estate, has about a third of the revenue of Hargrove Medical Systems and roughly twice the opinion of himself. She said this without venom, just information. He's not a small man. But he's not this. She gestured between the two of them, at the table, at the hotel, at something larger that didn't need to be named. What happens to the boy? Raymond asked. Vivian considered. The Meridian Group has a conduct policy. Walter will decide how far to take it. The father, she tilted her head. The father will be embarrassed, which may or may not be more instructive than anything legal could accomplish. I genuinely don't know. Raymond nodded slowly. Does it matter to you? Vivian asked. What happens to them? He thought about that. He thought about the lobby, about Diane's eyes, about Preston's silence, about the 12 people who had been in various parts of that lobby and who had watched a 61-year-old doctor get shoved into a check-in desk and had found somewhere else to look. What matters to me, Raymond said, is that Diane doesn't lose her job over something that wasn't her fault. Vivian looked at him for a moment. Then she took out her phone and typed something. Done, she said. They finished dinner. Vivian ordered dessert. Raymond had a second coffee, black, no sugar, with a small glass of cold water on the side. At the end of the evening, as they waited for the elevator, Vivian said, You know what I've always respected about you, Raymond? That I always order my coffee the same way. That you never make anyone work for your dignity, she said. You just have it, and you let that be enough. The elevator came. Good night, Vivian, he said. Good night, Raymond. She stepped in. She was smiling. See you at the board meeting. The next morning, Keith Albright came to Suite 1408 at 8:45. He was alone this time, no Preston, no rehearsed language. He stood in the doorway with the look of a man who has spent a night thinking about something. Dr. Okafor, he said, I owe you a genuine apology. Raymond looked at him. Not a system issue, Albright said. I made a call I shouldn't have made, and I'm sorry. It was not, Raymond reflected, the apology of a man who had been transformed. It was the apology of a man who understood that a line had been crossed and that there would be consequences. But there was something in it, something small, real, that felt different from the rehearsed version of the night before. I appreciate that, Raymond said. Albright nodded once and left. Raymond went back to his coffee and his board reports. The morning was clear, the view was good. The board meeting was in 4 hours, and he had 2 papers to review before then. He did not think about Brandon Sutton. He did not think about Gary Sutton. He thought briefly about Diane and was glad. He thought, also, the way he sometimes allowed himself to think in the quiet moments before the day took over, about how many times this had happened, not here, everywhere, how many lobbies, how many lies, how many careful silences, how many men and women who looked like him had stood in the platinum line and been told to move along, and had moved or had not moved, and had carried it home with them either way. He thought about all the ones nobody called Walter Crisp for. He thought about that for a long moment. Then he refilled his coffee and went back to work. That was the thing about Raymond Okafor. The world kept testing whether he'd break. He kept showing up whole. I keep thinking about the moment Raymond Okafor closed that hotel room door. Not the lobby, not the confrontation, not even the dinner with Vivian Hargrove. I keep thinking about the door, the quiet click of it, the way he stood in the middle of that suite and just kept going. Washed his hands, ordered his coffee, opened the board reports. That's the part nobody talks about. The part after. The part where you decide what you're going to do with what just happened to you. I've seen what happens to people when they let moments like that one define them. When they carry every Tuesday like a wound that needs to be shown to someone. And I understand it. I do. There is real pain in being told to move when you have every right to stand still. But Raymond didn't do that. He didn't perform his dignity for the lobby. He didn't make Brandon Sutton the center of his day. He kept the thing that mattered most, his own clarity, and he walked out of that lobby with it intact. That's not passivity. That's a particular kind of strength that takes years to build. What struck me about Raymond was that he never confused silence with surrender. He knew exactly what was happening when Preston picked up that phone. He knew exactly what Albright was doing when he showed up at the door with his rehearsed language about system errors. Raymond had been through enough Tuesdays to recognize the shape of a lie, even when it wore a blazer with a logo on the pocket. His intelligence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It worked quietly, the way good judgment always does, reading the room, knowing which fights cost too much and which ones were worth every ounce. And then there's what he asked about at dinner, when Vivian told him it was handled. He didn't ask what would happen to Brandon. He didn't ask about Gary Sutton or the corporate account or whether Albright would be reprimanded. He asked about Diane, the woman behind the counter who had looked away because looking away felt like the only safe thing to do. That one question told you everything about who Raymond Okafor was. Because the truth is, the Brandons of the world rely on one thing above everything else. Not their father's money. Not the corporate accounts or the regional directors or the phone calls that get made when pressure needs to be applied. They rely on the rest of us staying quiet, on the Dianeas of the world calculating the cost of speaking and deciding it's too high, on the lobbies full of people who find somewhere else to look. What Raymond understood, what he'd built over 61 years of showing up whole, was that you cannot control who Brandon Sutton is. You cannot control what Gary Sutton calls in. You cannot control what Gary Sutton stays silent, or whether Albright comes to your door with a rehearsed apology. What you can control is who you are when it happens, whether you stay in your line, whether you keep your voice even, whether you ask about Diane. The world kept testing Raymond Okafor. He kept showing up whole. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing.